Hello, everyone, and welcome to Episode 8 of Manchester to Madrid World Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Rogers, and I'll be joined today by my good friend and co-host of the show, Sam Johnson. Today we have a fun episode planned for everyone, covering all things world football, including the MLS group tourney that's coming up, as well as rating the 10 most promising European U20 players in the world right now. But first, if you're checking us out for the first time and like what you hear, or have been around since day one, it would be amazing if you subscribed, left us a 5-star review on Apple, and shared with your friends that love football as much as we do. We are available everywhere you listen to your podcasts, including Apple, Google, YouTube, Spotify, and many more. Find us on Twitter at RRMTMFootball and at SJ10MTM, or send us an email at mtmfootballpod@gmail.com. And without further ado, let's get on with it to Episode 8. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Sam, and he's going to lead us off with his hot take for the week.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with kind of a theme that we've seen over the last couple of episodes we've done with Bayern Munich and everything that's going on with them. This is more of a long-term prediction from me, but I think we could see Bayern win a lot of German championships for the next couple of years. They're about to win their 8th straight. They're one win away now with their win yesterday. But I could see them winning 15 or 16 or even more than that Bundesliga championships in the next couple of years with the direction things are going. Not only with them, but it just doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't feel like anyone can take that jump up to catch them anytime soon.
Yeah, we've seen numerous teams be really, really good. It's a bit crazy that the Bundesliga is genuinely a really good league, yet it's still Bayern Munich at the end of the day. We see them play these really good teams like Mönchengladbach, Leipzig, Dortmund every year, consistent, and then they still win these games when they go up against each other, and it's just like it's never going to end. Bayern will always be superior, and I think you're right. I don't think we'll be seeing another team win the league anytime soon.
The thing is with Bayern is they're able to beat all of the small teams. We see with Dortmund, with Leipzig, with Mönchengladbach, they're very good against good teams, and they play a very good style of play that can beat some of the top teams in Europe, but they struggle against some of the smaller teams, and that's where Bayern's always going to have a leg up on them, is Bayern's going to go to these smaller teams, Union Berlin and Paderborn, stuff like that, teams like that, and they're always going to win. They're always going to have a dominating performance, and it's never going to be a struggle for them. Whereas some of the other teams, maybe in that top 6 race, are going to go to some of those smaller teams and drop points every now and then. And you can't catch up to a team like Bayern if you're not getting every single point when you need to get it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case, and I think a lot of them winning against essentially everyone is depth. Bayern have the money. They're backed way more than any other German club in the league. And because of that, they're able to sign a lot of really good players that would start on a lot of other teams. This past weekend, they played Gladbach, still found a way to win 2-1 despite having no Lewandowski or Thomas Müller. And those are arguably their 2 most important players, especially Lewandowski, who's been insane this year. They threw in some young youth striker, and I'm pretty sure he scored, and then Goretzka scored at the very end, and they managed to beat a very, very good Mönchengladbach team.
And that just shows you what I'm talking about here is they don't necessarily need to beat teams like Mönchengladbach. It's always nice to win those games, but if Bayern are picking up maximum points from everyone from 7th down, they don't have to win those top tier games, but they're winning them anyway. And so, yeah, I think that just backs up what I'm saying. Bayern, we could see them win 8 more championships in a row in the next 8 years. So, yeah.
And for my hot take this week, this one isn't so much a take or a prediction or anything. I just want to say shout out to Sam again. Back-to-back weeks, he has just been incredible with his bold predictions so far in the podcast. He's just been so good at seeing these things a few weeks ahead, and hopefully he keeps it up. But a couple weeks ago, Sam said that Timo Werner wouldn't end up joining Liverpool, and we just caught this recently that, wow, Sam is probably going to get that right. It looks like Timo Werner's deal to Chelsea is essentially wrapped up. This past week they've been talking about a medical and finding out when they can sort of finalize all those little details to get the deal over the line in the next couple weeks. But yeah, Sam once again got another bold prediction right, and it's super cool that he's getting these right consistently.
Yeah, we talked last week, in my opinion, about how Liverpool are struggling with their kind of reinforcing their squad and kind of pushing forward with what they have now. And a part of that, in my opinion, was Timo Werner. But a couple weeks ago I said that I don't think Timo Werner will join Liverpool. I wasn't sure really where he was going to go, but I just didn't see that urgency from Liverpool. I talked about, in that same hot take, I talked about Kai Havertz maybe joining Liverpool. I'm not even sure that's even on the cards right now. Liverpool are just kind of, they're surprising me right now because they're not moving forward. They seem to be content with what they have now, and that is not a good formula. I talked about it last week, so I'll make this short and sweet, but we can see Liverpool drop off if they don't keep pushing forward. They need to make signings. They need to make depth signings here to improve the squad.
Well, I think just the other day, the director for Dortmund said that Jadon Sancho was expected to be playing at Dortmund next year. Now, granted, I think this is a bit of a lie. I think he's trying to maintain Jadon Sancho's value and keep it really, really, really high because he's trying to create a bidding war for his player, but he went ahead and specifically ruled out any sort of deal involving Liverpool. So that probably is truth. It shows that Liverpool haven't really pushed forward with any sort of deal despite having a supposed interest in the player. And yeah, I think Sam could definitely be right about this ambition. Now, granted, last year they had a bit of the same situation. They didn't really sign too many players, and then this year they've absolutely dominated. But there comes a time when it just can't go on forever. One of my most favorite things that I've learned watching football all these years, Sir Alex Ferguson said it quite a long time ago, so I'm sure Sam will be familiar with it, and Zinedine Zidane has learned to value Alex Ferguson's advice when it comes to this. Ferguson said that no matter how good your team is, it's only going to last probably 3 or 4 years with the same players at like the highest level before they start to drop off, before your coaching starts to lose its impact. And I think maybe in the next couple of years that same effect might happen with Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool unless they sort of shake things up, bring in some new players, bring out the old ones. So yeah, Sam's definitely on the right track, and I hope he keeps it up.
Yeah, what we saw with Alex Ferguson when he said that was kind of, you always have to have that competition. You always have to have, the top players. You're in his teams, the Ryan Giggs, the Paul Scholes, the David Beckhams, players like that, always had someone behind them that was kind of pushing for their spot. And so you had to see them playing 100% every week. And that's something that, with Liverpool, are Sadio Mane, are Mohamed Salah, players like that, are they going to get kind of complacent? Are they going to get, oh, this is my spot, like I don't have to play my top game every week to, keep my place in the team? I don't think that'll happen necessarily next year, maybe even the year after that, but I think that you always have to have that degree of growth in the squad, and that Liverpool, they have decent squad depth, but I'm not sure that squad depth could hold up to playing the amount of games they played this year and what they'll play next year for the next couple of years. I think that could be a slight problem, but we'll have to wait and see.
Last thing on this, we even look at some of the greatest midfielders we've ever seen and the midfield trios that we've seen from Real Madrid during that stretch of Champions League dominance. Luka Modric, Toni Kroos, and Casemiro, those were the three, and they dominated European football no matter who we were playing, whether it was Bayern, Barcelona, Juventus, Liverpool, whoever it was. They completely dominated a midfield, and despite how elite they are, despite at the time they were probably 3 of the 5 best midfielders in the world, it started to wear thin. Now, granted, Luka Modric got old, Toni Kroos's legs are slowing down a little bit, but still, even the best slow down over time. It can't work forever, and we had to see the incorporation of Fede Valverde, for example, come into the team and really shake things up, because no matter how good your team is, it cannot go on forever without a shakeup. Well, with that being said and that out of the way, I'm going to throw it over to Sam, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on with Manchester United this past week.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with something that Ryan mentioned about Jadon Sancho and Dortmund kind of mentioning that they don't see him leaving this summer. I think this is, like Ryan said, this is probably mind games going on from Dortmund's side of things. They're going to try to create a bidding war for the player. What we'll see in the next couple of weeks as time goes on is Jadon Sancho is going to want to force that move. He's going to want to push things across, especially kind of with the Premier League, maybe wrapping up in the next month and a half. I'm not sure exactly how that works with him maybe being a part of that. The Bundesliga is going to end before the Premier League is really into the main part of things. So could that move be done then? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I think it's like what Ryan mentioned. Dortmund are playing mind games here. They're trying to up the price on Jadon Sancho, but I don't think there would be that big of a bidding war for him. I don't see many other teams other than probably like United, maybe City, Real Madrid possibly, but I just don't think there'll be that kind of chase for him. I don't think there's going to be 3 or 4 teams all bidding $100 million for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why he might be saying that. It seems like a bit of desperation and attempt to get these other teams interested. Otherwise, he could leave for right around his value, and I'm sure Dortmund don't want that.
Yeah, and with that being said, moving on to another player we've been linked with, there hasn't been that many, to be honest with you, which is kind of uncharacteristic of Manchester United in our transfer windows. We're linked with thousands of players, but not this summer so far. Another strong one we've seen, though, is Donny van de Beek. Now, he's been all over the place with Real Madrid links earlier this year. This connection we've seen has been mainly built on the relationship that Ajax and Edwin van der Sar, their CEO, have with Manchester United. And this also all depends on what we see with Paul Pogba. Now, what we've seen in the last couple of days is Paul Pogba looks like he is going to stick around. It looks like we are going to trigger the extension in his contract for an extra year. So we'll definitely see him stay. And it looks like United won't be signing Donny van de Beek if Pogba stays. So I would go ahead and kind of rule that one out. I don't see that happening, but Donny van de Beek's an incredible player, and it's like what I was saying with Liverpool. There's no harm in signing another great first-team player for competition, but I don't see that happening this summer.
Yeah, and Ajax seem to let their really good players go for fairly cheap. So, I mean, we've seen if Liverpool have any sort of weakness, it's in their midfield. They could use that one player that's just way better than all their other midfielders. All their midfielders are around the same level. Jordan Henderson, a really good leader, but not that good of a soccer player, to be honest. Wijnaldum can pop up with a goal here and there. He's really athletic, but overall talent-wise, not that great. Naby Keita has been a bust, so a player like Donny van de Beek may be that missing piece they need, that shake-up that we've been talking about that could really keep them going for the next couple years. And I don't even think they've been linked with them. So,
and kind of the last thing we have for United news this week, of course, we have our first game coming up next Friday. Super excited for that against Tottenham. The Premier League coming back on Wednesday, so super, super excited about that with everything going on there. But we did see the team have a couple of friendlies against West Brom. We actually saw last week we were supposed to have a scheduled friendly against Stoke City at Carrington, but the Stoke City manager, Martin O'Neill, actually came down with the virus right before the game. So kind of a close call there, but needless to say, that didn't happen. So we did see a couple of friendlies against West Brom. One result, we lost 2-1. We won the other one 3-1, but we did see a very, very strong mix of academy and first-team players used in both squads. It didn't really tell us too much about what system we'll see or what players we'll see together, whether we'll see Bruno and Paul Pogba playing together right when things get off the bat, or what kind of system we'll see the team deployed in. Will it continue in that kind of the 3-5-2 system that we saw right before the break, or will we go into maybe a 4-3-3 that suits Bruno and Pogba? And Rashford being back, of course. So super exciting there. Of course, with the friendlies, we didn't see too much of the highlights or anything, but we're moving in the right direction here. We're getting prepared, and we can't wait to see our team play this Friday.
Yes, and before I move on to Real Madrid, I just have a quick question for you. When they're healthy, everyone assumes Pogba and Bruno Fernandes are going to play together in the same midfield, in some sort of trio probably in the midfield, and that makes total sense. They're probably two of your three best players, two of your four best players. But who do you think partners those two the best? Who is the best anchor? You have Matic, McTominay, Fred. I just want to hear a little bit about your insight regarding who do you think would work with them the best and why?
Yeah, so this has kind of been the question that all United fans have been asking in the last couple of weeks. Will we see Paul and Bruno play together? Because I don't think we have that natural complement to them. Nemanja Matic is the closest thing. That would be my first answer. Nemanja Matic could be the holding midfielder, the guy that locks everything down, but he doesn't have the legs, I don't think, that's necessary to back up Bruno and Paul Pogba in that situation. If you want to go towards the athleticism, Scott McTominay would be perfect for that role because he runs all day. He's all over the place. But I think he's a little too attacking. I think he goes forward a little bit too much. He could definitely be trained to stay back and to hold that role. But I think Scott McTominay does provide a really strong ability going forward as well. So he might be a little wasted in that 6 role. Fred, we've seen have a great season. He's definitely been our comeback player of the year. We saw Jose Mourinho sign him for a lot of money, and he was just not good in the first year. This season he's been great. He's been fantastic linking play up, so I'm not sure if he's really that guy either. The most natural thing I could see is a diamond midfield. I'm not sure how how much we've trained in that, or if Ollie knows kind of the tactical ability to run that system or not. You also need really good fullbacks. I'm not sure we have the attacking fullbacks for that either. So it'll be super interesting to see. The easiest answer to that question you asked is Nemanja Matic. I think we might see him playing behind them, but we could see a huge variety of combinations this Friday.
So moving on, we're going to move into Real Madrid news. First up, it looks like Rayo Valladolid have found a rough deal, or it's going to be finalized very soon with Real Madrid regarding Javi Sanchez, center back we've loaned to them this past year. He didn't start off too well, but it looks like he's finding his feet. He's been pretty solid for them when he does play, and it looks like they're going to wrap up a deal for around $5 million, $4 million, somewhere in that area. Nothing too big, but just wanted to touch on it. One of our academy players moving on to another really good Spanish team, which is fairly common. We've got a really good academy, so we often see if those players can't make it at Real, they move on to other teams and tend to have really good careers. So just wanted to touch on Javi Sanchez. Next up, there are a lot of reports saying Eden Hazard has looked really, really good. I don't want to get anyone's hopes up or get anyone really carried away. At the time of recording this, we are about 3 hours away from kickoff before Real Madrid. I'm super, super excited. I hope Eden Hazard starts. It looks like he's either going to start in a front two up top with Benzema, or he's going to be put over on the left with Benzema and then someone over on the right, Asensio or Bale, one of the two. But yeah, everyone has been thrilled with how Hazard has progressed. His fitness is back. He's looking really, really sharp. His finishing ability is primed and ready to go, and I really, really hope we can see that comeback from Eden Hazard, prove the doubters wrong, and have a really good end of the season. I think it would go a lot towards his confidence, the team's confidence in him. The fans would all be really excited about Hazard, and it almost feels like a new signing. And if he comes back healthy, ready to go, Eden Hazard next year is going to be sort of our leader going forward in that front line. And I think he just provides that extra spark and that just explosive Galactico ability we need in the team. So, like I said, hopefully he's back and ready to go. And yeah, that's basically everything on Eden Hazard. Hopefully he plays really well today. We see him get a good amount of minutes, and yeah.
We all miss the Chelsea Eden Hazard, and I think we've been robbed of that this year with his injuries and with maybe a little bit of struggles from Real Madrid at certain times. We've been robbed of seeing top notch Eden Hazard, and we know he's capable of that. And I think with everything coming back this weekend, Real Madrid, like you said, playing a couple hours, I'll be watching that. I know you will too, Ryan. I really hope we do see that great Eden Hazard back.
Yeah, I've watched Eden Hazard's Chelsea goal from last year or 2 years ago, I think, the goal against West Ham where he drifts backwards towards the center circle, receives the ball, turns, and beats everyone, and then scores. And it's just one of my favorite Eden Hazard goals, and I'm just so excited. I'm really hopeful we can get that magic back from Hazard for the remainder of the year and for years to come. Next on the list is regarding Achraf Hakimi. Constant reports. Nobody has any idea really what's going to happen with his transfer situation in the near future. Both the Dortmund and Madrid leaders have essentially said that Hakimi will be returning at the end of the year. His agent confirmed this. So Hakimi will be back at Real Madrid. He needs to sign some sort of new deal to keep him. Otherwise, he'll only have 1 year left on his deal. And it's been discussed that Dortmund are looking to bring him back, more than likely on a permanent deal or a loan with a buy option. Personally, I think Zidane was the one to bring Hakimi into the first team, so I don't believe we're going to see Hakimi leave. I believe we are going to see him sign a new deal and eventually take over Carvajal's spot at right back. But yeah, just a little update on Achraf Hakimi. Dortmund are continuing to pursue him, and it makes total sense. He's been one of the best right backs in the world this year, and just one of those players at Dortmund that has really led that attacking brilliance that they've had all year long.
We touched on a couple of weeks ago with Hakimi kind of being the perfect player for Dortmund's system and everything, and would he want to go back there? I think he would absolutely want to go back there, but in my opinion, with Real Madrid, you can play for one of the top teams in the world in Real Madrid. Dortmund, just looking at the teams themselves, Dortmund would have to pay a fortune to get Hakimi back next year. I don't think that kind of the loan to buy option is really realistic next year. So we could be looking at a huge transfer fee. Now, if Dortmund do sell Jadon Sancho, they could have the money there to get him back, but I just don't see it happening. I don't see Hakimi wanting to go back there when he has, in my opinion, a lockdown first-team spot in Real Madrid's team.
Last up on the Madrid news, we probably got the biggest jersey leak we've ever gotten in world football this past week. All three of Madrid's jerseys were leaked along with like 14 or 15 other clubs. We have the white one, the black, and the pink. there's been a lot of heat centered towards Adidas for coming out with jerseys that aren't really well loved. And I know this is small news. This isn't like team news or anything, but yeah, I'm wondering if Adidas are going to be changing the jerseys at all. I believe we saw the 3 prototypes, but from what I've heard, I mean, it seems pretty official, and a lot of people have not been super excited about the jerseys. But yeah, just a small thing on Madrid's kits for next year. They're obviously a huge revenue stream for the club. So, I mean, that's basically everything on the jerseys. Instead of doing our winners and losers for the week, we are actually going to touch on the MLS situation. This past week, MLS announced their new tournament, basically how they're going to be doing their season this year. Instead of their traditional season, they are hosting what is going to be called the MLS is Back tournament. Very, very non-creative name, pretty lame from MLS, but I mean, that's basically what I expect from the American League. So yeah, Sam and I are going to jump right into the MLS is Back tournament. It is coming July 8th. It's going to be World Cup style. There's going to be 6 groups, 3 in the Western Conference, 3 in the Eastern Conference. Group A, which is in the Eastern Conference, is actually going to have 6 teams, while all the other groups have 4 teams. This is because with expansion and everything, there happens to be more Eastern Conference teams than there are Western Conference, so MLS had to find some sort of solution to that, so they decided to throw a bunch of either expansion or really bad teams in one big group together. This is going to run very similar to how any other big competition would. The top 2 advance from each group, with the 4 best third-place teams going in, and then it will proceed from there like a typical World Cup or Euros, whatever tournament that plays like this. So, yeah, that's basically how MLS is going to do their regular season this year. I think it's going to be pretty short. It's going to be hosted in Disney World or Orlando, I do believe. So, Sam, what are your thoughts on this tournament as a whole and what MLS are doing to kind of experiment with this different sort of approach to their regular season?
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I'm not a fan. And obviously, with the circumstances we have right now and the virus and everything, you can't do anything normal. But in my opinion, this just takes away from having the best team prevail. With the tournament like this, I'm not sure how many games we'll see in the individual groups or how long they plan on having this run this year, but it doesn't seem like to me we're going to see the best teams win. We've seen so many times before, and I've always been kind of critical on the MLS playoff system because we can see a team get really hot at the right time and win the MLS Cup. Not because they're the best team, not because they've had the best season, they've had the best squad, and they've won the league. That's not how MLS works. And so in a way, this is kind of just a shortened version of the MLS season with, like I said, one team. We could see Chicago, who hasn't been very good in the last couple of years, we could see Chicago get really hot and win the MLS Cup, and their name will be etched in history as MLS Cup winners from 2020. And I'm not a fan of that. MLS does some suspect things that we can't necessarily be fans of, but in my opinion, I'm just not that big of a fan of this setup. I think it could be super interesting to watch, and I do believe that MLS wanted to create a way to draw as many eyes as possible, and that will happen. They will get a lot of eyes on these games, especially down the stretch here in the more important games. But looking a little bit closer on the groups themselves, it's not evenly stacked at all. And we looked at the Eastern Conference, which is notoriously weaker, and it definitely is in this situation. We see Group A, some of the weakest teams in the league in that group. Out of the Eastern Conference, maybe Atlanta, maybe New York Red Bulls could be the 2 teams to watch out for in that setup. But the Western Conference is very stacked, and it just this system I am not a fan of. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm optimistic about it. I'm not looking forward to it that much in terms of us seeing the best teams win. What do you think about, Ryan?
Yeah, I have a slightly different opinion. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a huge MLS fan. I don't have an MLS team. I don't watch regular season. I do watch postseason, though, because I think that's when it gets interesting. It's a little bit more fun to watch that do or die for all the clubs involved. But, yeah, I mean, there are some pros and some cons. Like Sam said, it's a very abbreviated season. There's definitely going to be an asterisk beside the season, like, oh, by the way, this happened. We didn't have a regular season. But at the same time, what better time to experiment with your league or the setup of something than right now? Everywhere is struggling to figure out a way, other than it seems like the European leagues have figured it out and it's working really well. But in the U.S., we look at the NBA, the MLB, MLS now, they're all trying to find ways to get back into action. And I think MLS are just trying to shake it up a little bit. It seems like with this format, they can create this new excitement for the league because, I mean, we can't lie. The World Cup style of play is really, really fun. Group play is really, really good usually. So I think the MLS is trying to adapt some of that, have some new excitement, build some energy around the league while still having an abbreviated season. But as far as the execution goes, I'm starting to wonder, is it the best? Like Sam said, the Eastern Conference is notorious for being weaker than the Western Conference. Group A in the East is a total disaster, and the two best teams in the East probably, Atlanta and New York, are actually in the same group, which just doesn't make sense. And then we look at the Western Conference, Group F in particular, an absolutely incredible group, 4 really good teams, LAFC and LA Galaxy, so we'll have that derby, which is actually a genuine derby in MLS, which was something I thought we would never have, but it's actually turned out to be a really good rivalry. And then Houston, who Sam has said have been pretty good recently. I don't watch a ton of MLS, so a lot of it comes down to what Sam has to say about it. But he's told me Houston's been pretty good, and obviously Portland is a mainstay. They have an excellent fan base, a really good stadium, and usually some really good players. So it all just comes down to the execution, how it's going to go. Hopefully both of us are wrong. Hopefully the execution ends up being really good, and it ends up creating some really good excitement for MLS. MLS could definitely use some marketability, some more traction in the market because so many people just watch European football, especially the Premier League in the U.S. because it's so easy to watch. But yeah, that's basically everything on MLS. We just wanted to touch on it because it's some really big news, and we hope at the end of the day MLS can succeed. Neither Sam or me want to see them suffer. We don't want to see them fail. We want them to be good. We want the quality of soccer to be really good. We want it to be exciting, interesting to watch. If it was more interesting to watch, I know I would definitely tune in more. So basically everyone wants the MLS to succeed, and we'll have to see how this season goes. Hopefully they can figure out a way for it to be an exciting MLS season with a lot of good action and hopefully a legitimate champion at the end of the year. Well, with MLS covered, we are going to jump into transfer news like normal. I'm going to kick it over to Sam, and he's going to tell us a little bit about Dayo Upamecano and what's going on with him.
Yeah, so with Upamecano, we've seen him have a very good year with Leipzig. We've talked about it a couple of times on this podcast. In the last couple of weeks, though, we've seen him get a little bit of criticism about his red card record. We've seen him get a couple in the last couple of weeks, actually. And he missed a little bit of time at the start of the restart through suspension as well. But Arsenal are on his tail. They really want him. They've been talking to Leipzig pretty heavily, and apparently Leipzig have promised Arsenal that Upamecano's first destination, if they can agree a deal, will be Arsenal. I can believe this. I think that would be a really good move for Arsenal. I think in the last couple of weeks, we've seen Upamecano show that he might not be ready for the jump to a really top-tier team. No disrespect to Arsenal, but they're not exactly there right now. But I don't think he's ready for a move to one of the really good teams, one of the elite teams in Europe. So I think Arsenal maybe, even if it's just a segue into a top team eventually, or if this is what he plans to do for a long time, I think it's a good move for both. I think it's pretty likely.
Yeah, Upamecano is an interesting one. There were those reports about a month ago of him just being off to Bayern, like it was a done deal. And then a couple days later, it was, nope, Upamecano is actually signing a new deal with Leipzig, and he's going to stay another year, but his his release clause isn't changing. It's been rumored that Zinedine Zidane wants him as his first choice center back if we sign a center back this summer. So reports basically everywhere. Personally, I think Upamecano is actually going to stay one more year at Leipzig, really grow to be a really solid center back. I think he is a really, really good player. He can actually be one of the best center backs in the world in 5 or 10 years or so. But right now, he's got some mistake proneness to him, just a couple little issues he needs to sort out. So I think one more year at Leipzig would be really good for him. I believe he's going to stay one more year and then make the jump to one of those bigger clubs, a lot bigger than Arsenal, because I think he deserves it. So definitely keep an eye on Upamecano. Next up, the director at PSG has come out this past week and said that both Thiago Silva and Edison Cavani are officially leaving PSG as free agents at the end of the year. This is really interesting. It's a bit sad, honestly. This is end of an era situation for PSG. When they first broke onto the scene with Zlatan, they had David Beckham for his last year, Thiago Silva, a bunch of really, really good players, and that was sort of the beginnings of what PSG have slowly evolved into over the years. But Sam, what are your thoughts on Thiago Silva and Edison Cavani? Could you see them maybe move back to their domestic countries? I know Thiago Silva has definitely come out and said he wants to stay in Europe, and I think he's good enough to stay maybe 1 or 2 more years. I think the same applies to Cavani, but what is your opinion on what's the deal with them, and where do you think you could see them maybe fitting, or a team maybe being able to use them in the next year or so?
Yeah, I think this is a really good segue from the MLS tournament we were just talking about. We've seen Edison Cavani have some links with Inter Miami, of course, David Beckham's team there. I don't think it's like you said. I think they are both too good for that step down right now. The problem I think that we'll see with them is the wages. It'll be super interesting to see if a team in Europe is willing to gamble that much money on these guys, because Thiago Silva, especially in my opinion, is still a top 10 defender in Europe. I hesitate in saying any higher than that, but what we've seen with him and Marquinhos over the last couple of years has been a good foundation there. I think he's a fantastic leader, and he could help any squad in Europe. It'll just be those wages. And with Cavani, I think we've seen him get a little bit inconsistent over the last couple of months, but that could definitely change. Of course, that usually happens with strikers in Europe, no matter what their age or their form or anything. They always go through ups and downs. So maybe a team, Atletico Madrid, Inter Milan, something like that would be more willing to give him the wages he wanted on a short-term deal and then see him move to maybe back to his domestic country, maybe to MLS or something like that.
Yeah, I think Cavani at Inter would actually be really interesting if Lautaro Martinez leaves, more than likely for Barcelona if they're able to find the money. But a Cavani-Lukaku partnership up front with Eriksen behind them would be really, really interesting. It seems like it's fairly easy to score goals in Serie A than it is in some other leagues. This notion of Serie A having a really, really strong defensive presence throughout the league is sort of misguided. It's outdated. It's no longer the way Serie A plays. So I think Cavani could have a lot of fun at Inter Milan, and we saw him dominate at Napoli. So why not go back to Serie A, maybe have 1 or 2 years, have a shot at the Scudetto, and maybe win 1 or 2 more trophies before taking that step down, like Sam said.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Cavani going to Inter Milan, I would love to see Thiago Silva go to AC Milan, go back to where he really exploded onto the scene in Milan. Whether that could be possible or not, whether Milan have the money, I'm not really sure. Milan have just been a disaster over the last couple of years, but that would be super great to see for just the romantics of football, him going back there, back to where it all started for him, back to where AC Milan actually could win a league. They were the last team to win a league not named Juventus in Italy. So that would be fantastic to see, and I think we'd all enjoy that. We'd all love to see it, and I think he would be a huge improvement for their squad.
Last up on the transfer news, an indirect discussion of Jadon Sancho. We're not going to touch on Jadon Sancho specifically because we talk about him almost every week because he's constantly in the news, but instead we're going to look at some potential replacements for Jadon Sancho. They've been linked with several players, including Ferran Torres and Jude Bellingham specifically. Those are the two we're going to touch on. I'm going to talk a little bit about Ferran Torres, and then I'm going to let Sam talk about Jude Bellingham since he's coming from England. Ferran Torres has had a fantastic year at Valencia, Bayern, Real. A bunch of teams have been interested in him. He plays right winger but can shift over to the left. Really dynamic, a good crosser. He's fairly good at finishing. He honestly reminds me of Marco Asensio when Marco Asensio blew up on the scene. Just very dynamic, like I said, can drop deep, receive the ball, dribble, a fairly good finisher, and all-around pretty solid player. So I think Ferran Torres could definitely make the jump to Dortmund. Valencia are a bit of a selling club. They tend to sell their really good players for reasonable amounts of fees, and then they jump up to the next club. If Dortmund were interested in him, I believe they could agree a deal somewhere in the 50 million mark, and if Jadon Sancho leaves this year, they'll definitely have the money for that. So keep an eye on Ferran Torres. I think he could be a really good player for Dortmund and be that Jadon Sancho-like replacement that they need on the wings for years to come if Sancho leaves this year.
Yeah, and with Jude Bellingham, as we move to him, I don't think Jude Bellingham is a like-for-like replacement for Jadon Sancho at all. Jude Bellingham is more of a number 10 or a number 8 rather than a flair winger as Jadon Sancho is. The 16-year-old has such a high ceiling. It's his ability for being 16 is incredible. We saw him kind of deliberating between United and Dortmund as being kind of those two main teams. What we saw and what his decision was based off of in the end, I think, was the first team football he could get at Dortmund. He could not get at United. Right now, our midfield is probably our strongest area of United's team right now. And so it would be super hard for Jude Bellingham to get game time. All he would have to do is look at Angel Gomez, and what he's struggling with United right now is getting those first team minutes. So it does make sense for him to go to Dortmund. It does make sense for him to want to go somewhere where he can get those first team minutes. He can get the growth. All he has to do is look at Jadon Sancho and Erling Haaland and players like that who have just grown astronomically at Dortmund.
Yeah, I think Sam makes a great point. Jude Bellingham moving over to Dortmund seems like a win-win for everyone. Bellingham plays there for a couple years, ends up getting really, really good, just like Jadon Sancho and any other English player that moves to Dortmund at a young age. Turns into a star and then moves for a big fee over to another really, really good club, one of those elite tier clubs, maybe back to England. Manchester United may be interested in him again in a couple years. I'm sure they will be, in all honesty. So, yeah, Jude Bellingham probably making the right choice by going to Dortmund. The latest reports are saying that, in fact, he is going to go to Dortmund. He's chosen not to go to Old Trafford, and I think Sam has a great point about playing time. That definitely has to influence your decision. It definitely influenced Erling Haaland's decision, and we've all seen how that turns out. But yeah, that's basically everything regarding transfer news. We're going to go ahead and jump into our main segment of the show. This episode is titled Ranking the Next Generation for a reason. Sam and I are going to look at and rank the 10 best U20 players right now in the world. Some basic guidelines for this ranking system. We're going to exclude 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds because those players, just some of them are absolutely ridiculous already, and they would be really, really obvious. Players like Jadon Sancho, Kylian Mbappe, for example, just really, really boring. So we're going to focus on players under 20 years old. So we're going to go ahead and start off with number one. Sam and I went over this list together. We're not going to have two separate lists. We did this together and have a rough agreement on all of them. So Sam, what do you have for number one?
Well, number one, it's pretty obvious, I think, for all of us. It's Erling Haaland. No one can really argue with this. I don't think anyone has any basis to say that Erling Haaland's not already a top 5 striker in the world with his goal output right now. No questions asked here. Erling Haaland, he's on the verge in the next couple of years of a huge, astronomical move to one of the top teams in Europe. So we'll just have to wait and see there. But with his goal output right now and just the ability he brings and the just fear he gives to defenders at the age of 19 is just incredible, and we're only going to see him grow even more.
Yeah, we look at the game this past weekend. Dortmund going up against Paderborn, I do believe, and Paderborn were extremely good all game. And it comes to the 94th minute. We're well into stoppage time. Final whistle's about to blow, and Erling Haaland steps up. He already has the clutch gene. A great cross whipped in from the left side. Erling Haaland has a perfect little flick off the back of his head. It's into the back of the net. Dortmund win 1-0 and keep any sort of title hopes alive. So Erling Haaland, just a remarkable player, like Sam said. He's basically said everything that needs to be said regarding Haaland. He is an exceptional player, a really good striker. He has the size, he has the speed, an incredible finisher, can poach, can score from outside the box, just a rocket of a foot, all-around really good player. We're definitely going to see him continue to rise and move to one of the elite clubs in the next 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, moving on to number 2, we see another Bundesliga player that we've talked about plenty of times. It's Alphonso Davies. The rise that we've seen from him in the last 6 months especially has just been amazing. Ever since Hansi Flick took over and moved him back to that left wing back spot, he's been fantastic. We see with a team like Bayern, he doesn't have to focus too much on the defending, and with his speed, we've all seen those clips on Twitter of him just running down someone from 40 yards away. It's incredible. He doesn't have to focus on that defending. He can focus on what he was kind of brought up to do, and that's going forward. We see with the Canadian national team especially, he's still going to play up top for them. That's not going to change because he's such a threat going forward, especially in the CONCACAF kind of setup there. But he'd be so dangerous for them, and Canada have a bright future with him. We've just seen him rise so high, and I think he's already one of the best left backs in the Bundesliga, never mind Europe. So the rise isn't going to stop for him.
it's very often where we say, wow, that player was remarkable. We're not going to see someone like him anytime soon. I've definitely said this with certain Real Madrid players. I said it with Cristiano Ronaldo, and then in the past couple of years, we've got Kylian Mbappe. Now, granted, Mbappe isn't as good as Ronaldo quite yet. He may be one day. We'll have to wait and see. But it's just remarkable how quickly some of these younger players are developing. Mbappe is probably the closest thing we're going to have to Cristiano Ronaldo in the next couple of years. And I said the same thing about Marcelo, and now it looks like Alphonso Davies is turning into that dominant left-back player that can lead a team and really do a good job defensively while also dashing forward and being that creative spark, whipping in crosses. He's got a good goal-scoring record. He's really turning into that all-around really, really good player. Granted, he's not as Flair-esque as Marcelo. He doesn't have the step-overs or that Brazilian magic that Marcelo has been so well characterized by. But Alphonso Davies, he just has basically every other quality you could need. A really, really good player, and he's definitely going to be one for the future. Probably going to be the best left back in the world in 5 years or less. And at such a young age, that's only going to continue. I'm wondering if he's going to stay at Bayern his whole career or if he's eventually going to move to a team like Real Madrid or Barcelona. Obviously, right now, Bayern are absolutely elite, the best team in the Bundesliga by a mile, probably the best team in the world at the moment, but we've seen other players, despite Bayern's dominance, still want to take that next step, and I think you can't really go higher than Barcelona or Real Madrid. They just have that magic pulling power in Spain that attracts the best players, so it'll definitely be interesting to see if Alphonso Davies eventually makes the jump. Regardless, an absolutely phenomenal left back, and at such a young age, it's been incredible to see his rise. Next up at number 3, one of my favorite young players right now, if not my favorite, and that is Vinicius Jr. at Real Madrid. Usually plays on the left wing. One of my biggest gripes with him is we haven't seen the dynamic ability that we kind of need to see him grow, and because of that, when Eden Hazard's on the field, he hasn't been allowed to play really because he can't feature on the right or really anywhere other than the left. He heavily relies upon cutting in from the left. Lots of step-overs, that flashy brilliance that someone like a young Neymar had, but he has to be featured over on the left. Now, if you take that out of the equation, the only other problem I have with him is his finishing ability, but he creates so much chances, and finishing can be taught. Over the years, that's only going to improve, especially with the players around him that are so good at Real. But he is so talented. A bit raw right now, but I mean, we saw last year when we had no players to step into Cristiano's footsteps, and we just needed that spark that Madrid so often requires to be considered one of the best teams in the world. We had a line led by an 18-year-old going up against Barcelona, up against Atletico Madrid, and despite not scoring a lot, he was the player that was the only creative spark we really had. An absolutely just dominating presence when he played against those teams last year, and I think that's only going to continue. He's only going to grow faster, stronger. His finishing is going to improve, especially being surrounded by players like Eden Hazard and maybe future rivals we'll see in the near future. But yeah, Sam, any thoughts on Vinicius?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. If anything I've seen of him, it's just that finishing. He just needs to add that finishing touch. He needs to add the ability to score from, when he goes on these amazing dashing runs and cuts inside and whatever he ends up doing. He just needs to add that finishing touch. But I have no problem with him being at number 3 because the ceiling is clearly there. He has that Brazilian flair. He has that arrogance that you really do need to be a really top player. And so I think you hit it really well there.
Yeah, he definitely reminds me of Neymar when it comes to confidence. At such a young age, you don't see a lot of players taking on these elite-level veteran defenders, and Vinicius is one of those players. He doesn't care who you are. He could be going up against Diego Godin, Gerard Piqué, and he'll put you on the ground. He is that good. So Vinicius Jr. at number 3, and now I'm going to let Sam touch on number 4. Now this one is a little bit more controversial. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think he would make our list, maybe not at number 4. I'd probably have him a little lower, but Sam is going to make the case for Mason Greenwood.
Yeah, we had a little bit of an argument here between Mason Greenwood, Camavinga, and Rodrigo over the next couple of picks, but in my opinion, what we've seen from Mason Greenwood at his age, at the age of 18, is just unmatched. He has the ability to score with both feet. He has this unseen composure for such a young kid in such a tough league and in the giant club of Manchester United. He doesn't seem phased. And if we make this list based off of current ability, I think he definitely is number 4. I don't think there's any question with that. And if we make this list based off potential ability, he could be even higher, in my opinion. The connection between Robin van Persie and Mason Greenwood is so clear. The two they have this ability to just score from wherever they're at. They can go on a dashing run from 40 yards away up to the box and throw a bullet in. Mason Greenwood has some of the hardest shots I've ever seen. The ball explodes off his foot. But not only does he have the shot, he has, like I said, the composure. He turns so well. He can play with his back to goal and find the pass backwards. He can find the pass going forward, and he has the mindset and he has the awareness to make these runs in behind the defenders, to be found by Paul Pogba, to be found by Bruno Fernandes, the through balls there. So I have no problem with him being number 4. I think that we could see him really blossom into a top striker in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I do believe Mason Greenwood's really good. I definitely see the comparisons to Robin van Persie, given they're both left-footed. They have that little something you can't put your finger on exactly, but just that ability to move, a very good movement around the box, just pops up in these little spaces, and boom, the ball's in the back of the net. Like Sam said, a bullet of a left foot. I will give him that. Some of his goals the past year or so, just missiles. The camera can barely even keep up with the ball, and then boom, the back of the net is shaking. So Greenwood's a really good player. I will say I don't think he's not as talented as someone like Rodrigo, Vinicius, Alphonso Davies, or some of the other players we have on our list. But as far as on-the-field performances so far goes, Mason Greenwood has been really, really good, and he's backed it up with his goal-scoring record so far this year. Coming in at number 5 is Rodrigo, another Brazilian at Real Madrid that has all of the ability in the world, the playmaking ability, the flair, the finishing, just a remarkable player. And Sam and I did have a brief argument, like Sam said, regarding Greenwood and Rodrigo, but we ended up putting Rodrigo at number 5. I think a lot of that has to do with the second half of this season. We just haven't seen a lot of him for whatever reason. Some things behind the scenes, Zidane hasn't been playing him that much, but we saw towards the beginning of the year when Rodrigo was featuring on the right because Asensio was obviously injured, Vinicius can't play on the right, and then there's just the Gareth Bale drama that's always persisted at Real. Zidane chose to field Rodrigo on the right, and he was phenomenal. I think something he has that Vinicius doesn't have, he already has that finishing ability. That hat-trick against Galatasaray in his Champions League debut really proved that. Rodrigo is a really good player, lots of confidence, and unlike Vinicius, he's a lot more direct. He will, square you up and go straight at you and head straight towards goal. Vinicius has a bit more of flair in mind, a few more step-overs here and there, that Brazilian magic that we've seen from players like him and Neymar. Rodrigo will go straight at you, and I think that's definitely an important asset to have, and it offers a lot compared to Vinicius. You don't really see that just directness. Vinicius picks up the ball and you think, wow, he's going to beat that defender. Rodrigo picks up the ball and you think, wow, he's going to go straight towards goal and possibly score. Can shoot with his right or left foot, and yeah, just really high on Rodrigo. Hopefully we see him get more playing time the remainder of this year, maybe next year, or maybe even a loan is an option. But Rodrigo has all the talent in the world and all the ability to be one of the best wingers in the world in years to come. Next on our list at number 6 is Eduardo Camavinga. I wanted to put him much higher on our list because for a 17-year-old being the best player on your team and being one of the best midfielders in your league, there's a lot to say about that. Granted, it is Ligue 1, which I understand is not the most impressive league in the world, and the competition isn't always there outside the top few teams, but Camavinga, a meteoric rise, just really, really good all around. Can play the ball on the ground, in the air. He has that size that not a lot of center midfielders have, but he still has the athleticism to get up and down the field, plays that really good box-to-box role, and I think he's going to develop into a really, really good holding midfielder. I'm expecting that to be at Real Madrid, and if he is to come and be Casemiro's backup for next year, he could really develop into one of the best midfielders in the world.
Yeah, I can't argue with that at all. I think what made me want to put him lower on this list is, like you said, he plays in Ligue 1, and we haven't really seen his performance against the top teams. Really, we've seen. I don't know if he played against PSG this year. I don't know what that match looked like, but Other than that, I don't think we've seen him play that top-tier team. We haven't seen him really make the difference in a big game. That's the only reason I kind of knocked him a little down this list. I think 6 is still great for him, and I think his ceiling is as high as he wants to go with it, especially if he makes a move to Real Madrid this year. We'll see him just explode. But yeah, no, I wanted to have him number 6 because I don't think we've seen quite the same flair from him. We haven't seen the pure talent from him that we've seen from the players above him on this list, but he could definitely get there. There's no questioning that.
Statistically, I think Camavinga is probably a top 3 on this list. He has backed it up with his interceptions, his ball playing ability, just exceptional for Stade Rennais. And if he doesn't move to Real Madrid this year, then we'll see him play in Champions League for Stade Rennais. They finished 3rd or 4th in Ligue 1 this year, so he would actually get to play in Champions League, and he would actually get to go against those really, really good teams if he doesn't go ahead and move to Real.
Moving on to number 7 on our list, I'm going to humor Arsenal fans a little bit with this. It's got to be Gabriel Martinelli. We've seen this year him playing in a front 3, usually with Aubameyang and Nicolas Pepe, has been decent at times for Arsenal. I think Martinelli's been one of the main players there. I remember him playing against United at Old Trafford. He was very good. He was giving Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who has to be one of the best defensive right backs on the planet, he was giving him problems. And you can tell when a player that as young as Martinelli is, and I think the thing that impresses me the most with him is he's a big guy. He has a very strong stature, and he's very quick at the same time. I think the players we see here from number 7 down, we've seen moments of just brilliance from, but we haven't seen maybe necessarily the consistent play we've seen from the players above them on this list. But Martinelli, very strong, very good shot, very skillful. Being Brazilian, of course, he's going to have that Brazilian flair. So I think we could see him really have a rise in the next couple of years. And I think Arsenal's a really good place for him to be because he's going to get a spot where the fans will really take to him. He has a place where he can grow, express himself. And I think we could see him shoot up this list in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I remember a couple years ago, probably 5 years or so ago, Andrei Yarmolenko was one of those really exciting players. Ukrainian, played in the Ukrainian league, but was touted as a really, really good right winger. And he had that size, yet he still had that magic in his boots. But he was still well over 6 feet tall, and he played on the right wing. Gabriel Martinelli kind of reminds me of a more talented version of him. I think Martinelli's going to have a much better future, a much better career than Yarmolenko, but just an early comparison that I found worth noting. Next up is another Real Madrid player. It brings me a lot of joy to have so many Real Madrid players on this list. They are just Real Madrid are building something special. Granted, it looks like we're having a few issues here and there. These past 1 or 2 years have been a little bit tough without Cristiano Ronaldo on the team, but we are building something special for the future, which I think a lot of other big clubs can't say. So coming in at number 8 is Takefusa Kubo. We signed him this past year from the Japanese league. Previously, he was playing for Barcelona's academy, and they had to let him go because there were some restrictions or rules they had broken, something like that. And Barcelona, as we all know, just don't do a very good job of planning for the future. But Kubo has been magnificent. Unfortunately, we loaned him to a RCD Malacca team that just isn't that good. He's by far the best player on that team. And we look at games this past weekend up against Barcelona. It seems like the only thing Malacca could think of as far as some creative spark goes is kick it over to Kubo and hope he can beat the entire Barcelona team and score. So it's crazy to me how good Kubo is at such a young age. I believe he's 17 or 18, and he's playing at a team that isn't very good. He's already their best player. He provides essentially all of their creativity going forward. So I think a loan to a different team next year, someone like a Sociedad, if Odegaard ends up returning to Real, or just another team with just a little bit more talent in La Liga, could be a really good move for Kubo. He has all the ability to be one of the really, really good players in the future. What I like so much about Kubo is how dynamic he is. We've seen him, similar to Odegaard, he can play on the right wing, the left wing, but he can also drift back, play in that center attacking mid-role, or even drop deeper into that center mid-role. He can really play it all, and I think that's definitely a characteristic that is going to serve him very well in the future. So definitely keep an eye out for Kubo next year. Like I said, hopefully he can get a loan move to a little bit of a bigger club in La Liga, or maybe even somewhere like the Bundesliga, and we could really see him thrive in the future.
And moving on to the penultimate player now on our list, we're going to go for William Saliba. we've seen him be signed for Arsenal, and they loaned him back out to Saint Etienne. And Ryan, you said this to me earlier. I haven't watched him very much, but he has been consistent for Saint Etienne this year. Arsenal really are building something here. If they can end up signing Dio Upamecano and have Saliba there, they probably have two of the best young French center backs. Of course, we know France are very capable of producing some very, very good center backs. So, yeah, it's very exciting for Arsenal. We've seen him get the first team football, like you said. We've seen him kind of develop into a stronger, a big build center back. And so the future's exciting for him in Arsenal there.
Yeah, Saliba definitely gives me early Rafael Varane comparisons. That's why Zinedine Zidane has been interested in him, and I think Saliba is a long-term target for Zidane if Zidane sticks around for quite some time. There's a reason so many clubs were interested in him when he first popped up in Liga 1 or 2 years ago, I do believe, before Arsenal ended up signing him. He is really, really talented. He's not amazing at anything quite yet. He's still only 19 years old. But he has all the characteristics to develop into a really good center back. He's not really bad at anything. He has the pace, he has the strength, the size. He is good at winning duels in the air, can play the ball well from the back, just all around really, really impressive. And it's nice to see a center back making this list. I know we have a lot of really good attacking players, but when you're a defender and you gain a lot less attention, it really goes to show when you can make a list like this. And I think Saliba is going to be a really good defender in the future, especially at Arsenal. I don't often say this, but Arsenal seems to be a very good fit for the specific player. Saliba can be really, really good there. Like Sam said, he's getting minutes at Saint Etienne, that first-team exposure that you need at such a young age to really grow into a really good player. So, yeah, definitely keep an eye on Saliba in the future. Can be an absolute rock at the back for Arsenal and maybe a future team if he really turns into a world beater in the next couple of years. And with 9 players out of the way, that brings us on to number 10. We are going to leave out a couple players. Callum Hudson-Odoi was a notable mention in this list. I believe he has all the talent in the world. He is a really, really good player with a really high ceiling, but we've seen just like some other players at Chelsea, he has some injury issues. Similar to Ruben Loftus-Cheek when he first blew up on the scene, a player that has a lot of talent, but just the injuries so far have really kept him out. Premier League's coming back in a week's time, and Hudson-Odoi seems to be healthy and ready to go. He signed a new deal at Chelsea, so it will be interesting to see if Lampard uses him for both the remainder of the year and next year. It looks like Timo Werner and Hakim Ziyech are essentially done deals, so will there be room for Hudson-Odoi in the front line? But yeah, like I said, Hudson-Odoi, all the talent in the world, but right now, since he hasn't been on the field, he's just going to miss out on this list. So we've left number 10 for Ansu Fati, a really, really good player, but extremely raw. Very young right now, only 16 or 17, debuted for Barcelona this past year, and we've seen moments where he has just been breathtaking. He has a really good foot on him. He reminds me a little bit of Mason Greenwood, honestly. Maybe a little more flary, a little bit more capability regarding dribbling, but just that really good ability to sort of find those spaces where he can shoot. He has those goals. Very, very good player.
I don't think this list would have been complete without Ansu Fati. We've seen in the last couple of weeks, we've seen him kind of linked with United. Very, very loose rumors. Like, there's no way this would happen. But the numbers we've seen thrown around, 100 mil plus for he's 17, right, Ryan? He's
17.
That young. Yeah, 17. So, I mean, I think he's like the comparison you made to Mason Greenwood is fair in some ways, but I think he's more of a winger, more of a kind of a take a defender on type player, whereas Greenwood's more of a on the shoulder of the defender type player. But I think it's fair in terms of we've seen Fati come up with some brilliant moments, like you said. He's being compared to some of the top players in the world, and at 17 years old, that's just incredible. And we'll have to see whether he lives up to that. We'll have to see whether he gets his feet on the ground and starts, bulking up physically and keep getting better at his trade. Of course, there's no better place to do that than Barcelona, and then to have the Lionel Messi in front of you to teach you some things. But like I said, this list wouldn't have been complete without him on it. And it seems like a fit to me that, like we said, with a lot of the players on this list have this incredible ability, and they just need that one more thing to push them to the top level. I don't think he's quite there yet, but I do think he deserves to be number 10.
Sam and I have culminated an excellent list, in my opinion. These are some of the brightest stars for the future. Just excellent players all around. Like Sam said, if they can find those one or two little things, they could definitely separate themselves from the pack if they haven't done already, and they could just be world beaters for years to come. So definitely keep an eye out for all 10 players we've mentioned for the remainder of this season and next year and the year after that, and so on and so forth. Really good players. I don't believe any of them are going to be flops. They're just all too talented and all in fairly good systems for them. That is Sam and I's ranking of the next generation.
Yeah, and if we left anything out on this list, please feel free to reach out to us. Let us know in the comments section if you're listening to it on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a tweet if you're listening to it on any other platform. But that's going to go ahead and wrap everything up this week for what we have on the Manchester to Madrid World Football Podcast. Tune in next week. We'll be covering all the football drama as well as recapping the first weekend of La Liga and as well as the first weekend of the Premier League. We're super excited. We hope you guys are as well. If you like what you heard today, we'd love you to subscribe to us, our podcast on Google, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and rate us on those platforms while you're there, and share us with a couple of your football friends as well. We're on YouTube, as I mentioned, so check us out there and subscribe, like the video, and we thank you guys so much for the support, and we'll talk to you next week.